morning. Okay, so for those who may not know me, my name is Maci Coulter. A little bit about me. I'm a senior at Spring Valley High School. I play an alto saxophone. I'm currently the senior youth elder for the church. I plan on attending Clemson University in the fall, and I will be majoring in elementary education. And I have an audition for Tiger Band coming up right around the corner, so fingers crossed. And I've been attending Spring Valley Presbyterian Church for my entire life, through baptism, confirmation, and everything in between up until now. So this year's Youth Sunday theme is a fountain of blessings. And throughout my many years here, I found my own fountain of blessings within this church. So this morning, I'd like to take a few minutes to share a few of those experiences with you. Starting in Strikers, where I enjoyed countless Edgar Allan Poes, and for those who may not know, that's when we poured all of the drinks together. And where I swear we could have played the game Betrayal a million times with the best story narrator there ever was. Yep, you guessed it, Mr. Lance Roper. And from there, I moved right on up into junior highs, and I got to go on some of my first youth trips. One of my first and most memorable youth trips was the one to Cross Missions in Charlotte, North Carolina. During this week, I was introduced to concepts that I'd never before really given much thought, like homelessness and poverty. This trip was a blessing in my life because it sparked an interest in mission work and in giving my time and efforts towards helping people like those I met in Charlotte. Finally, I reached my time in senior highs, and starting in senior highs was a bit scary for me at first. Throughout middle school, I was that one quiet girl that just kind of kept to herself, and for me, entering the group with all the big kids, I was totally lost. But then came my first trip to Montreat. I had no idea what to expect, and I was totally freaked out until I realized that there was one other person on that trip that was just as freaked out as I was, and that person was Elizabeth Dillon. Oddly enough, our shared concerns turned out to be a blessing in disguise because on that trip, I ended up gaining one of the best friends I've ever had. Montreat in and of itself has been one of the biggest blessings in my life. I've met so many amazing people in the past 3 years, some that I actually still talk to almost every day, and one that I actually hope to reconnect with at Clemson next year. However, one of my greatest Montreat experiences happened within our own SVPC youth group. During my freshman year trip, all the youth decided to do something very special. We crawled out of our beds at around 4 a.m., and we hopped on the bus and drove over to the Lookout Mountain Trail. And let me tell you, getting out of bed that morning was not easy. The only person on that trip, oddly enough, that was not ready on time was none other than Kevin. After several failed attempts to wake him up, it was decided that I was the one that was least likely to get yelled at if we knocked on his door again. So I crept up to the door as everyone stared at me, and I knocked softly, only to receive a very irritated "what?" from the other side of the door. Everyone's jaws dropped, and I just kind of cowered away. And he claims that he doesn't remember that, but trust me, we never let him live it down. And actually, I got a text from him this morning, and he wanted to make sure everybody knew that I was offered up like a lamb for slaughter. But anyway, since that was probably the second time I'd hiked that trail, it wasn't an easy climb for me. Luckily, my older brother David, who was a senior at the time, was right there with me. And while I knew he probably wanted to charge ahead of his slow-moving little sister, he stayed with me the whole time. He wanted to make sure that I was able to see the beauty of this incredible place like he did, and I thank you for that. When we finally reached the end of the hike, we all watched in awe as the sun rose over the vast mountain range. I truly felt God's presence that morning, and that is not something I'll soon forget. I could easily stand up here all day and tell you story after story of the wonderful blessings that I've been given at this church. However, I'd like to take a few minutes to look at some scripture. I've selected a verse for you all. It's from the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 11. And it reads, "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land. He will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail." Now, when you think about the literal definition of a fountain, it's a piece of architecture that produces a continuous flow of water. Applying this to my faith, SVPC has been my fountain of blessings, my never-ending source of love and support. And as I go out into the world, and as we go out into the world, we as believers are called to be fountains. Fountains of his love, and of his light, and of his many blessings everywhere we go. Thank you all for showing me the power of Jesus' love. I can say without hesitation that I would not be who I am today without the love and support of my family, this youth group, and this congregation. The time we've shared here together will forever hold a special place in my heart. Thank you.
everyone. I'm Victoria Collins. So ever since I attended my first Youth Sunday, I've wondered what it would be like to give a senior sermon. I told myself that I would be really prepared and ready and excited to read it. It would be fantastic and everyone would be amazed by the wise words I was saying. Of course, the day has arrived and I have to give one myself, and I had no idea what I was going to talk about. Our theme today is Fountain of Blessings, as you've heard, and I couldn't really figure out where to go with this one. I'm not really the best at talking about my blessings. I tend to look at the negative side in life more often than I should and blame it on typical teenage angst or the fact that that kind of mindset was sort of thrust upon me suddenly. So not even 4 years ago, my mother passed away. I'm breathing. It was a traumatic experience that no one should have to go through, and let alone a 14-year-old 3 days from entering high school, a time when a girl so desperately needs her mom. We all remember how bad high school was. After that day, I won't lie, I didn't have much of a focus on my faith. I attended this church more often because I was now living with my father full time, and that was pretty much the only reason. Until Kevin sat me down in his office one day. I can still remember it pretty vividly. I was prepared. The office had half of the t-shirts on the wall that it did when he left, and maybe a third of the pop culture figurines. He got us Chick-fil-A, and we just sat and talked for a while, and it was something I didn't know that I needed from this church until I had it. Ultimately, he encouraged me to go to youth group, and with the support of students like Robert Hogue, Caroline McManus, John Castleberry, and other infamous members of that senior class, this church began to feel like home. And I could go further and talk about how that homeliness continued when we all took our mission trip to Belize. I believe I was probably at the peak of my faith then, even though the arts and crafts division of the vacation Bible school we did tried that faith. I can remember seeing how passionate the people at Port Loyola Baptist Church were in their singing and in their worship, and I thought that it was such a beautiful thing to witness, and I'm glad I went. On another note, I remember walking down the street when we were in our last couple of days on that trip at K. Cocker, and Kevin found some extraordinary creature on Pokemon Go, and I texted him this morning to clarify. It was an onyx, and it was sitting on Justin Owen's shoulder. And so our group stopped and laughed as Kevin desperately tried to catch it, and for some reason that memory pleases me. Those are only a couple of the memories that remind me why this church has a place in my heart. And furthermore, as I get ready to leave for college, the very far distance of 20 minutes away, this church will always have a place in my heart. Now, pardon me while I sound like Oprah for a few seconds. I do have blessings, many in fact. My family is a blessing. That group of seniors plus Robert is a blessing. Kevin Nunnery is a blessing. That trip to Belize was a blessing. Everyone in this church is a blessing. And thank you all so much for what you've taught me as a community and a congregation. And God bless.
Oh goodness. Y'all, I thought since I already did this once that I wasn't gonna be nervous, but my hands are like sweating again and like my heart feels like I just ran a marathon. So bear with me, we're gonna get through this together. Okay, hi everybody. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Kelsey Green. I've been a part of this church for 17 years now, and I'm probably best known by many as the only 17-year-old girl on the planet who still wears and even decorates her Crocs. Shout out to Mr. McCallum because he always reminds me of how practical and cool they are. Anyways, so it was about 2 weeks ago that I finally realized that I am indeed a senior in high school, and then therefore realized that it's my year to give my senior sermon. My next thought then was I didn't go through seminary or any sort of preacher training for this, so I'm very unprepared. But the Bible is evidence that God calls on the unqualified, so here I am before you. As I began this process, naturally, like most common teenagers would do, I turned to Google for help. My first search was how to start off a good sermon. Not great, but definitely good. And pleasantly, tons and tons of results came up. Being the lazy person I am, however, I went with the first answer that it gave me, to incorporate your audience. So with that being said, at the end of this, I'm going to give you guys a task to complete so I'm not the only one feeling a little out of their shell on this wonderful Sunday morning. But here we go, everybody, finally into the real part of this message. The first time I heard the theme, Fountain of Blessings, my mind automatically went to, that's great, I have so many blessings, this is gonna be really, really easy. But luckily for you guys, I understand that this isn't an Oscar speech, so I'm not gonna stand here with tears in my eyes and thank every person individually. I'm instead going to talk about what the members of this church have shown and taught me without really even meaning to, about being a blessing to others and how to live a life centered around Jesus. Our theme and New Testament verse ties so perfectly together today. The verse which says, we as believers will have rivers of living water flowing from us, is a reminder that each day of our lives should be one full of pouring out love into those we are surrounded by. The picture described here is not one of a simple stream of water, but many flowing rivers, and we should continue to be filled by him so that the love of Jesus will flow as generously out of us as it has been bestowed upon us. We are to be the fountains through which Jesus can flow. These words are full of such hope that even if our lives don't look like this right now, they can, and the extent of this promise reminds us that anyone can be a vessel for the Lord to work through, and I can say in full honesty that each person I have met through this church is living out this word and surely has blessed me. If I could describe this church family in one word, it most certainly would be love. I experienced love through each of my preschool and Sunday school teachers. I experienced love as part of Strikers and going up through the youth program. And my goodness, did I experience love through all of my youth group trips, especially Belize. It's the most cliche statement ever to be said, but my second trip to Belize especially was the most life-changing and beautiful week of my life. That trip was just the beginning of my new walk with Jesus. I saw and connected with him in a way that I never had before. But just a fun fact, about 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, I sat in the car with my mom after a group meeting over the itinerary and a packing list, and I told her I didn't want to go. My mind was made up, but Jesus, thank goodness, had different plans. That trip is where I fully felt like a part of this church family and knew these people would love and support me with no end. Without a doubt, I know Jesus used each of the youth and adults on that trip to show me his love in new, sometimes uncomfortable, yet astounding ways. See, that's the thing I've learned about this whole walk with God lately, is that while it is sometimes uncomfortable, it's so perfect and full of peace. As I prepare to head off to Auburn University this fall, yeah, go Tigers! No one cheered in the last service, and I got kind of sad. I am full of so many emotions like eagerness and excitement, but also fear. I'm quite unprepared for this, you see. I don't know how to do my own laundry, and I can't even wake up to my own alarm in the morning. Ask my mom, she can attest to this. I feel like an outsider trying to work her way in. However, I know the good news of Jesus that so many of you have taught me and shown me throughout the years. I know that although we may experience rough waters, he won't allow us to drown in this life, and I am finding so much peace in knowing that God is in control of it all. So with that, I am instead focusing on the pure excitement of how Jesus will use me, not only during the next 4 years, but throughout the rest of my life. I feel comfort knowing that I have a church family at home always cheering me on and Jesus running this race by my side. There is seemingly no possible way that I can fail. I cannot thank each of you enough for loving me and helping show me the pure excitement of a life full of adoring and praising Jesus. So here's to my fabulous parents, though they did not show up to this service, for always choosing to believe in me and my dreams. To Kevin, though he may not be here, and all the other youth leaders for taking time to help me know Jesus better. To each of the youth for making me laugh and feel supported, and of course, a shout out to God for always being my #1 fan. Each person in this room has been a blessing in my life, and I know will continue to be. Through this church, I have gained a second family, and that is something I am grateful to be able to say I know will last forever. So here's my task for you guys. It's actually very simple. You just have to remember to do it. The last service didn't do it either. When this service ends, instead of rushing out or chatting with others about last night's dinner or the mess your child made this morning, grab one person in the room, just one, and tell them how they have been a blessing in your life or how you see Jesus working in them to be a blessing to others. My favorite Bible verse is John 1:16, which reads, "For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace." The word states it very simply that we have been given endless grace and blessings, and this congregation is evidence of that, so it's time we share our thanks and love with everyone around us. Thank you.